But first tonight on Checkpoint, both Labor and National held their first caucus meetings at Parliament today. All MPs present, the new and the old, and all hoping they'll be part of the next government. The deputy leaders of both parties say they would stand aside if required in order to give the deputy prime ministership to Winston Peters, so both parties ticking that box. But both parties are still figuring out the best people to conduct negotiations and are trying to identify where they have the most common ground with New Zealand First in policy terms. Taking stock of all this is our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Bill English received a rousing welcome from his caucus, with Labour's Jacinda Ardern being greeted in a similar manner by her MPs. Mr English says negotiations with New Zealand First are likely to last 2 or 3 weeks, but First National has to decide on its team.
That'll be something that I would discuss with Mr Peters. Of course, we would want a cohesive negotiating process, and we'll just structure it in a way that will suit New Zealand First and suit National.
Mr English says he's sure Winston Peters will focus on what's best for the country rather than dwelling on anything that's happened in the past, including his description of Mr Peters as a maverick.
I've known Winston Peters a long time, in fact for 27 years. I think we've been in Parliament together, longer than pretty much anyone else in the building. So there's a lot of things, I'm sure, as I said, a lot of political pushing and shoving. We've been in different parties for most of that time. You'd expect that there's, some differences of opinion.
His colleague Stephen Joyce, who was National's campaign chair, says the negotiations will be about policy.
It's not about personalities in terms of my personality or anybody else's. It's about putting together a government for New Zealand.
Are you willing?
I'm going to have to go in because the big guy's going in.
Are you willing to give up the finance minister role to Winston Peters if it means...
End of the day, I'm just happy to serve, and the Prime Minister makes all those calls.
This afternoon, Labour's Jacinda Ardern told reporters she had asked her front bench to start a policy comparison between Labour and the Greens and Labour and New Zealand First. She also said she and her deputy, Kelvin Davis, would lead Labour's negotiating team, but has not confirmed the other members. Ms Ardern was asked what Labour can offer New Zealand First.
A good working relationship with our senior MPs and a good existing working relationship. Relationships are important in these negotiations, and I'd like to think that we have the existing relationship required to take forward a good negotiation and form a stable, credible, long-term coalition government.
Back on the National side, Paula Bennett says she would give up the position of Deputy Prime Minister if that's what's required to make a deal.
I'm not too bothered, to be honest. I love what I do. I'd still be Deputy Leader of the party. That's the main thing, really, so we'll just sort of work our way through it.
The same question was put to Labour's number 2, Kelvin Davis.
If it has to be, it has to be.
So it's something that you're open to then?
Yeah, but it's not something we would give up lightly, but it's... Jacinda being the Prime Minister is the main focus here.
Meanwhile, discussions about who would or would not be on the National Party negotiating team have revived questions about who leaked details about Mr Peters' superannuation overpayment. National's Chief of Staff Wayne Eagleson remains adamant the leak didn't come from anyone in the party. During the election campaign, the New Zealand First leader admitted, after questions from the media, he had been overpaid his pension for 7 years but had paid the money back. 3 investigations have failed to find out who was responsible for leaking the private information. Mr Eagleson was among those in government who were told officially about the overpayment. However, he told reporters today the leak did not come from him.
Categorically no.
Do you know who did?
No.
Have you conducted any investigations into the National Party to make sure it didn't come from within your caucus?
Didn't come from the National Party.
Mr Eagleson has resigned as National's Chief of Staff and will leave once negotiations to form a government are complete. Bill English says he stands by his original statement no one from his office was responsible for the leak.
Look, I take people at their word that no action was taken by my staff in making that information public.
The New Zealand First leader Winston Peters is in Auckland and is due to arrive in Wellington tomorrow to meet with his new caucus. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.